Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 1 of the Genealogy Pep Talk podcast. My name is Suzanne, and I will be your host. I work as a library specialist with Arapahoe Libraries in the state of Colorado, and I occasionally help patrons with their genealogy questions. I consider myself a genealogy hobbyist, as I've been working on my own family's history for a bunch of years now. The title of Genealogy Pep Talk came to me one day when I was searching for that elusive relative which every genealogist has in their research notebook, and I was just stuck. Where is my Swedish grandmother? I can't find her. Where did she go? Was she a spy? I say this in jest, as it was so frustrating because I could not find her anywhere beyond a certain point. Now, I did have a few listings of her in census records and a death record, but otherwise nothing. She just disappeared. And this is where I would yell out, in frustration, many a time, "Come on!" That is when I realized that I needed a pep talk. I needed a genealogy pep talk, someone who could point me in a new direction to search for her, or just tell me to take a break, to give the search a couple of hours or even a couple of days or weeks and just come back to it fresh. As a lot of us know, genealogy is something that comes with difficulties. It comes with peaks and valleys, and even yelps of yahoos, and occasionally a cacophony of cussing. But I will tell you this, when you ping on something or someone in your search, that's the best feeling, because you have either found a new name in your family or you've found another piece of information that just solidifies an answer to your question. This podcast, I hope, will be of some help to the beginning genealogist as well as the experienced family historian. There will be some tips and tricks that I have learned in my own search, and maybe a few anecdotes of some do's and don'ts in searching that I have found to be useful in my own quest for my own ancestors. I am sure most of you genealogists out there have heard of Ancestrycom, which is a website that has become extremely popular in the last few years. People have become intrigued by their family history, their heritage, their ancestors, and where they came from. New genealogists may know what their nationality is, or have heard the family lore around the dinner table, or are just bored and want to learn about their family's past. So Ancestry.com is a terrific way to start or restart your genealogy search. To begin with, if you're not familiar with Ancestry.com, just go to arapahoelibraries.org, our website, to start. Look for the Research tab, click on it, then click on the word genealogy. Scroll down a wee bit and you will see Ancestry Library Edition. Click on that. Type your library card number or alternate ID, and then type in your PIN, personal identification number. You will see the words Ancestry Library Edition pop up. Okay, next, get a notebook. You're going to need it. This notebook is for the many notes you will be taking. You do not want to keep going back to the same name, which may not be your relative anyway, and that first name that pops up in your search may be one of hundreds or thousands of people of the same name. With that said, when you start, sometimes it's good to start with your grandparents' names, first, middle name or initial, and last, their birth date and or birthplace, and a town or city that they lived in later on in their life. Sometimes you will get lucky and their name will pop up on the first page of the many pages, but make a note of that record, especially of what you entered and what the record has listed, because that is valuable information that you might not have known about. And if you do not write it down, I guarantee it will be lost. I can attest to that, as that has happened to me a few times in the beginning of my search. And that is a lesson learned. So I have with me two people who are going to help me on this Genealogy Pep Talk podcast. The first person is Cindy. She, too, is a library specialist with Arapahoe Libraries. Hi, Cindy.
Hi, Suzanne. It's great to be here. And I just want to say that Suzanne has found more people in my family tree in 2 weeks than I've been able to do in a couple years. So that's why I'm here to learn from Suzanne and Katie.
Katie is a reference librarian with Arapahoe Libraries as well. Hi, Katie.
Hey, how's it going? I'm really happy to be here. This is my first podcast, so this is an exciting adventure and something out of the norm for me. I, too, am an amateur genealogist. I've been doing it since I was about 9 years old with my grandma. It was always our special thing. So I'm here for enthusiasm and also to bring some expertise on using digital e-resources and the library's sources in general.
Excellent. Because I don't know about you, but I am not a techie, so it's very good to have techie help. So thanks.
Good to be here.
Let's talk about how our genealogy passions started and when. Katie said she got started around age 9. That's very early on. Myself, I got started probably 25 years ago. Like I said earlier, I was looking for information about my Swedish grandmother. And my dad didn't really know a lot of information because he was from a generation of children should be seen and not heard. So he would sneak around the corner and use his hearing to just kind of spy on his parents and grandparents. Oh, spy. See what I did there? So there must be spies in the family. Anyway, and so that's how he got a little bit of information, but he didn't get a lot. So I got a lot more by researching and putting, things together. And then with my mom, she gave me a lot of information verbally when I was a kid. And then her side has been a lot easier to find and to go back because I just have more people to search for in that family. But it's a real passion for me. And I have taken 2 genealogy online courses sponsored by the library. And it has opened up my mind of how to research and just some interesting things to look for when doing some of that research. So I'm very grateful to have that experience and education. So, Cindy, how did you get started?
My mother was, she's a first generation from my Polish grandparents who came over here in 1911. I have always personally been interested in my family history, but no one in my family was. In fact, my mom and her sister never really even talked about their ancestry or anything at all. And actually, internet has really been able to generate this. So when I first went on and heard about Ancestry or ellisislandrecords.org, I was able to get some information. But, so then I would start getting deeper. And when my mom and my aunt were still alive, I'd ask them, when was your parents' anniversary? They had no idea because they didn't celebrate it. And it was just another day for them. So a lot of these things have been lost. And I think that's just what happened, in the old days when you didn't really have a lot of presents and things like that. So that's how I really got interested. As everybody says, I wish I had talked to my mother and aunt before they passed and given them more pointed questions. But I never thought about it until it was kind of too late. So now with the internet, that's really what has driven me now.
Yeah, I agree because I was doing this before the internet and I did not know where to look for anything because, when you're a youngster and in a library, that's how it began. I was just like, I don't know who to look for. And I was also in a different state from where my parents were from. I'm from New York, my parents as well. And basically all of our family is New York, New Jersey, or Pennsylvania, Philadelphia primarily. So it was harder to look in a library, public library, when I was living in Florida with books because they don't have that information there. But now with computers and the internet, it is a lot easier to find someone across the country or across the globe. And it is great. So if you don't like computers, well, you might want to love them because you'll get a lot more information by using the internet.
It's almost like you get so many hits, it's almost overwhelming, but at least all that information is out there because would you have had to go to New York State to get birth certificates or death records. Is that how they would do it before internet?
Yeah, I believe so, because I would have to go to the Department of something. I'm not sure what it is. Maybe it's the Department of Health for the birth certificates, which, by the way, as an aside, there's a genealogy side for that. So to get a birth certificate, a copy of that for under genealogy. But there's a cost to it. It's at least $25, $30, maybe even more now, in order to get that. And if you need 4 grandparents, not 4 parents, but 2 parents, 4 grandparents, and so forth, then, that's costly. But eventually I'm going to do that because I like to see the original record, and I like to have that in my hot little hands. So
sometimes some of those records you have to have a professional genealogist to get them as well.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I have run into that before where
Really?
they're required to be a certified professional genealogist that can request them.
Wow.
Yeah, well, you can really speak to that because you started when you were very young, way before there was a lot of internet access.
Yeah.
And even when the internet started, there weren't these things online because no one had thought to digitize these things.
Right.
That's very true. Without saying just how old I am, it was pre-internet, although not a lot before. And my grandma volunteered at the local history museum. I'm from Iowa, and so, she is from a very small town. My mom actually grew up in a town of 300 in the middle of nowhere. They moved up to a town of about 17,000. But my grandma volunteers for the history museum there, and she has as long as I can remember. And they also, do a lot of genealogy there. And I can remember looking through encyclopedic books, volumes of the Germans to America, passenger lists, and how do you just look through every single book? I mean, if you don't have an idea, I had an idea of what year my dad's paternal family came from Germany, but I didn't know anything exactly. And so, even a year's worth of passenger lists, that's a lot to look through.
Yeah, sure.
So, it's so nice now to have a searchable version of that where you can just enter the name and then have it pop up rather than looking through 20 volumes of this book.
Yeah. Well, especially in the case of my maternal grandparents who came from Poland, which was before World War I, which was actually part of Russia at the time. They didn't always know what year they were born. I mean, they thought, my grandma thought she was born in 1896. She didn't really know, and so what I have discovered a little bit with Ancestry is it does give you a little bit, birth date. Is it exact or is it, within, so you could type in 1894 to 1898 or something like that, and you can still get those hits. So that's what's great about the internet without having to go through every single box.
Well, not to mention the fact that there were so many ships coming. Not everybody went through Ellis Island. My family, I think, actually came into Baltimore. If everybody was coming to one place, well, that would kind of narrow it, but then it'd still be the same number of people. But adding numerous ports, numerous ships just coming constantly, it's a lot of information. So having a tiny bit of information like a year is much easier when you can just go into a database and search and say, I think it was this year. And you can say, plus or minus 2 years. It just gives you a lot of leeway in order to be able to find something. So I think I did finally, after years of looking through those books, I think I managed to just recently go online and find the ship that my family actually came on.
Do you remember the name of it?
No, I don't off the top of my head. I have it written down in my notebook because, yes, you do need a notebook. In fact, I have several. Not as many as my grandma. She's got a lot of binders and binders full of information. But, I think I did find that finally. So maybe I'm dreaming that. I'll have to go back and check, but I'm pretty sure I actually found it finally.
Well, is there something, because, ellisislandrecords.org or whatever, they will show you a picture of the ship or whatever, but if they came in through a different port, would that record, the actual, what do they call it, the docking?
Shipping manifest.
The shipping manifest, would they still save those?
Yeah, I think most of them. There's a couple years a little earlier in the 1800s, like I want to say pre-1882, maybe there's like a period of a couple years in there where where the records were lost. But most of those records are available, and they have pictures of most of the ships. So if you can actually figure out which ship it was, then a lot of times you can find a picture of the ship and the name of the ship. So yeah, I'd have to look up again, but I know that there is a gap in the years. There was a fire or something that was lost.
Fire, that's what happens to a lot of valuable
unfortunately, but
information. Yeah. Well, that's great that your grandma has all those binders, because a physical thing you can always go back and look.
Yes.
Say somehow that link gets broken on the internet and you're desperately searching for that, you're never going to find that.
Yeah.
So that you've got to be organized. I
agreed.
assume from what you two say, you really need to have an organizational plan.
So, okay, I'm going to admit this, and between the three of us, my organization are called tote bags. That is from years and years ago, maybe decades now. But I would just print everything out. And that's the other thing. You want to print everything out unless you write it down. But I suggest you print everything because it's a lot easier. Then you can put it in a binder. Maybe that's your paternal side. Maybe that's your maternal side. Maybe that's just Grandpa Joe. And maybe, Aunt Eloise. And so you may have a lot of binders, by the way, if you have a lot of family members. But it'll help you, and then you can, do tabs. That is my goal this year, to put those tote bags to rest and empty it and put them in a notebook of some sort.
Can you bring those in sometime, and we'll have a little send-off party to the tote bags?
Oh,
and
that's
just
nice.
Say,
we'll circle back around in December and see how successful.
We could do like a little Viking boat, and, instead of flames, it'll be like little flashlights. Yeah. And I admit that sometimes I've found the same record and I printed that out. So it's just a matter of organizing and organize your piles of papers, of notes, note cards, whatever you do. Sometimes people use a color-coded system, different colored index cards, Post-it notes. Maybe they have it on a wall like a bulletin board, and this is who I'm looking for now. And checked off. Found the birth record, found the death record, found the marriage record, found something else that was interesting. Maybe it's the find a grave information. That's kind of cool.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, find a grave.
Yeah. So anyway, the moral of this part of this Pep Talk podcast for you is get organized, get a notebook, and start early to organize your stuff. Don't wait decades like I'm in the middle of.
Yeah, that's very true. That I just was laughing thinking about printing things off, and I remember back in the early days of the internet, I had AOL email, and I remember actually printing off entire websites because websites were so simple back then.
Right.
And you would find a genealogy website, and I'd just like print off the whole website, and I probably still have those somewhere. God only knows
It'd be
where.
funny to look back at those. When you two are out on the floor, Suzanne and Katie, and people ask you questions, where do you start? Can be very overwhelming.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where I'm at right now.
So if I may, when I first started, I was here in Colorado. It was probably about 20 some odd years ago. I went to the federal building. The federal building at that time was located in Lakewood. And you could just go, you got to show your driver's license. Just say you're doing some genealogy research. They'll show you where to go. And if you've been there, you just, go where you need to go. And there was usually some volunteers in there. And so I sat down at a computer because you could do Ancestry for free there. And I'm like, I don't even know what I'm doing. What am I doing? So I asked this older gentleman who was very kind, and he said, well, just get your grandparents' names, where they lived, their birth date, and where they were born, and just go to the most recent census. At that time, it was 1930, because, by the way, the census comes out every 10 years. And so 1930 was available, and so I did. I'm like, oh, my gosh, I see them. They're from Greenport. Okay, that's them.
Yeah.
And that was a great discovery, because it's this, okay, here, this is the start of it. And he's so right. Just start simple. Grandparents' names, their birth dates, where they're born, and then a place where they lived. And that's the easiest way, and the most recent census. And talking about the new census, which I'm very excited about because it's in a couple of months, maybe about 6 weeks. See, I'm counting down. But the 1950 federal census will come out in
yes.
April 2022. So that's real excellent news for genealogists, because now we can get some more information.
Yeah.
So right now the most recent one is 1940.
Yeah.
But it's every 72 years, census plus 72 years, that's when the next one will come out. So.
Yeah, my dad will be on this new one because he was born in 48. So, my mom, not quite my mom yet, but that'll be exciting. And just a little side note there, I was just thinking about people wonder why that information doesn't come out sooner, is because, and a lot of times if you're on Ancestry too and you see private, it means that person is still alive, and that information is just not out there, you know, I would feel kind of weird if somebody could just, look me up and find out all my information, and because there's a lot of details on there, Social Security records and whatever, and so for people that are still living, they try to limit that. So that is a good thing to think about too. If you see that there's your grandparents had 3 children and there's no information there, well, it'll be there if they have passed away, but not if they're still alive. But
Oh, that's a great point.
Yeah.
I would never have really thought of it that way. I thought they just waited a long time. I'm not quite sure why.
No.
Right. No, it was total for privacy. And at that time, I guess 72 years was kind of the average for a person's lifespan. So now, of course, we know it's like about 145, it seems. And because of all kinds of things that can help us live past that. But the other thing is that how I gained knowledge about genealogy is that the Mormon Church, LDS, they have a family history library in their temples, and which is open to the public. Nothing else is opened to the public. The altar, the temple itself, the family history library, and the restrooms are the only thing that you have access to. But it was great, and they have volunteers there as well, and they will help you in your search, because that's what I had. Some volunteers help me, and they had computers. I didn't have a computer at the time, so that was one reason why I went, and they gave me a lot more information on how to find things. They had access to Ancestry, and so I would do my search, and but it was weird because I couldn't find a lot of information because it was a while ago, and I wasn't thinking how to find that. Because you have to be a detective to do this. You have to want to be a detective, because you're investigating and you're researching.
yes.
And this is like a perfect thing for library people, by the way.
I mean, I consider that really fun.
Yeah, totally
too.
fun. It is. It's like, ooh, what am I going to discover today,
Exactly.
or who am I going to discover, And so it's just this fun thing, because there's always a mystery and, treasure seeking and treasure finding, what's going to pop up. So, and these volunteers were great, and they helped me to find some people, and
Probably teaching you at the same time.
Absolutely.
Where to go.
right, exactly. I'm very grateful that these folks have done their research, because they're mostly volunteers, and they do a lot of searching and so forth, which helps me to try to find my people.
Sounds like a huge treasure trove.
Yes.
And is it one of the largest collections of genealogical archives?
I believe
I've
so.
Heard
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
So
I believe so, for sure. And it's just a great source.
Well, and it goes back a long time too, because it's something that they've done for a long time. So there's some other places just don't have the length of collection,
Yeah,
I
right.
guess. I'm actually taking some classes through the National Genealogy Society, and I'm working on becoming a certified genealogist because I love it so much, and I would really like to maybe do something with it career-wise someday. One of the exercises that they had us do in their basic course was just start with a paper and like write some sentences about you, like, hi, my name is Katie. I was born such and such year. I have a brother. My mother is so and so. She was born such and such here. My dad was born here, blah, blah, blah. And then your grandparents. And you write just kind of a summary of the basic information, what you know about your family. And that's a really nice place to start. And I think it's kind of similar to what you were saying, just start at the very basics. So write down just a little summary of what you know. And then, because, as you're doing that, sometimes things come to you and you're like, oh yeah, they kept it pretty basic in the exercise. But I was like, okay, my grandparents lived at this address when I knew them. And just thinking of everything I could think about. You've got kind of some facts collected already. And then you can start going in and like putting them in your charts and, putting it in your notebooks and looking for records. And you can use the records in Ancestry to like verify. And, I have actually found a record about, I think, my grandfather. And I'm like, that's not right. Who put this in here? This isn't right.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a great place to start. Even before you start any of the searching, is just write down as much as you can about your immediate family. And a lot of times you'll have access to like your parents. Yeah. Maybe like I could get my parents' birth certificates because they're living and they live in the same county. And, going back to the grandparents and stuff, it's going to get a little trickier.
Yeah. Maybe if you have siblings, maybe have them write down a summary too.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe they're not passionate or invested, but just, hey, brother, can you do this as a favor?
Yeah.
Because maybe they have gotten information that you don't have in that family. Yeah. And your brother or your sister may say, oh, well, I remember this and that's and such and so. Oh, really? I didn't know that. Oh, well, because I wasn't even born yet.
Yeah.
Or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
So, and then, so maybe kind of do that and maybe make it a game or a family project or something fun. And, then spread out and then, do your aunt and uncle, your grandparents, your cousins, and get that. And if you have people who are passionate about genealogy, by the way, there are some people who are not and don't care about the history of the family. They're like, it's been done. I'm over it. Whatever. I don't care. And that's fine too. But if you're passionate like the three of us are,
definitely.
then, you may want to just join in and do something like that and make it fun, especially for little kids.
Yeah.
I think that'd be fun for them too.
Yeah. And well, that's a great point about your siblings, because I'm the youngest of three, but my oldest brother is 8 years older than me.
Right.
And it doesn't sound like that's a huge age
Right.
difference, but in that time, he met my great grandmother. And I never did.
Yeah.
And he remembers, so that would be a great thing to ask him. He's not really interested, but he'll probably bring some memories. Oh, I remember when Baba came and visited us, and I don't think you were born. Or if I was such a tiny baby that I didn't even.
Yeah.
And he might not even remember that. Jog up some memories from that. So yeah, that's a great idea to ask your siblings to kind of.
We always joke that my brother is actually a computer, and he remembers probably being born because he remembers everything a little swarp. But he's 3 years older than me, and he does remember a lot. And so I think it would be interesting to say, just like, do you remember? And like my dad's dad, I was 3 when he died, so I only have one memory of him, and that's when he was sick. So. Yeah. My brothers would have been 6, nearly 7 when he died. So, that he can probably think of some things that, just a different perspective. And that would be really interesting. I know he's not really into that stuff either, but sometimes you get him in a good mood, you can just be like, hey.
If you get together on Sunday family dinner or, Friday night movie, pizza night at home, maybe set up the recorder. There's some great apps. Recording apps for your phone, and people like to talk about themselves and so forth. So maybe just set the recorder on and just go to town and ask a couple of questions.
Yeah.
Hey, have any memories? Also, during the holidays, you have a lot of people there, and just set aside some time for that,
Yeah.
and that might be helpful too. And then eventually you can write it, type it down, and then record it into some sort of notebook or tote bag. And just have some fun with that. And because I guarantee it, you'll get some information and it'll be great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know that my family's in the process of kind of collecting family stories. My grandma's been working on a lot of that. She's in her mid-90s. Every time I go home, I think, I may not have the chance to talk to her again. So I'm hoping this summer to be able to go home and just, like you said, just as we're there at dinner, just record all the stories, because there's so many stories, and it's the kind of stories that like you can't make up,
Right.
fiction.
Exactly.
Real life is stranger than fiction, and
yes.
so just being able to have those. I mean, having something written is great, but also like just having my relatives say it and being
voice.
able to listen to that, like I think that would be really cool. And the likelihood is the future generations, they're at the age now, so if I ever had children someday, they're not going to know my grandparents, and so this would be a way for them to kind of get to know. So I think that those oral histories, I mean, humanity is based on oral histories,
Right.
it's such a huge part of our, the human race. So I think it's a really awesome thing to capture those. And I always feel like it just helps me know myself better. Like, that's where I came from. And
and once they're gone, those voices cannot come back and relate all those things, all those memories that they have.
Yeah.
Because we may know like dates and, when Uncle Joe got married and Graham got married, but to tell them in their own words, it's great to hear, and I wish I had done it. So I urge everyone to go start.
Yeah.
And since you have a phone, it's so easy to record that
yes,
now.
yes.
So there's no reason really not to.
Well, I was talking with my mom not too long ago about the fact that my great-grandma was born in 1901. And so, when she grew up, they were still using horses and carts. And she died in 1999. Just the gap in, like, automobiles, there weren't cars when she was a kid.
There were no airplanes.
There were no airplanes. There was no computers. There was no... I mean, to just have an idea, to just hear what life was like, is a really valuable thing and really fascinating.
That's such like a rich thing to learn. Like, my very own, because my grandma was born in 1901 and she died in 2003.
Yeah.
So she was 102, and I just was always like amazed at all the things that she had seen and gone through. She, my dad was a little boy during the Depression.
Yeah.
And they just had to do all these different things.
Yeah.
So, yes, I think that adds so much more when you hear them talk about what it was like then, because we can't imagine what it was like to not have a car or those things.
Or the fact that, my grandma ate brown sugar sandwiches because that's all they had.
Correct.
I mean, you just don't even think about those things. And
No.
this is why genealogy is so exciting to
I
me,
know.
because you dig
Yeah.
out all these histories and all these fascinating things. And
I know. I'm excited just talking about it. This is a great pep talk.
See?
I know.
And by the way, talking about sandwiches, my mother's father, back in the Depression, they had baked bean sandwiches.
Oh.
It's just the weird things that you do in a Depression, not 100 years ago, but almost 100 years ago, or 200 or 300 years ago. And here, we're either vegan, gluten-free, or whatever. Then they're just, I need a sandwich. I need to eat.
It was just
want
food.
food.
Right.
Food on the
It's food.
table.
And so, if you look at something like that, or what vehicles they drove, the hand crank, and no heater or no radio.
Correct.
Certainly no iPod and MP3 players, for goodness sake. But you just look at that, and so the times have changed, and our research has changed. The information we can get, and just amazing, from caveman sitting around the fire to us gals sitting around with microphones talking about our history and our genealogy.
Right, and all the resources that are available out there, because
Right.
there's Ancestry. Before I came here to the libraries, I didn't realize there were so many
Right.
of those websites.
The library has access to these things. So we, Arapaho Libraries, .org, by the way. You can search on Ancestry.com, which is free access through the library. If you want to buy it a subscription, you certainly can.
But they're pricey.
They
The
are pricey.
subscriptions are pricey, so
Right.
it's a great resource for anyone.
So you can have access to Ancestry, and also a little lesser known site called MyHeritage.
yes.
And that's also pretty helpful. And we'll talk about that another time. But then the other one is FamilySearch.org. We don't have access to it, but it's also free, so that you can get on that. So there's a lot of websites to choose, or use all three. Because that's what I do. I use all three, because you may get some sort of different information from one of the three. It's great to come to the library because we're here to help you. We're library specialists,
Definitely.
and we have a reference librarian here. So we are here to help you search and to continue with your genealogy search for those family members.
We'll light your genealogy fire.
Let me just give you a disclaimer. We are not professional genealogists. We are amateurs and hobbyists, but we can certainly help to guide you. If you do want a professional genealogist, you'll have to go down that road, and maybe we can guide you just to for direction that way. We hope this episode of Genealogy Pep Talk has helped, informed, and intrigued your genealogy interests.
I'm Cindy.
I'm Katie.
And I'm Suzanne. Thank you for joining us for episode 1 of Genealogy Pep Talk podcast. We'll see ya.